and longer limbs, we now have the necessity for hinge animation, meaning that if we rotate this upper part, these two pieces will follow, but if we rotate this one, only this one follows, etc. So how do we accomplish this? Well, there is a tool in this particular program called a bone tool, and I will probably call it a joint tool a few times just because in 3D that's what they're called. And it's exactly the same idea. It's going to take these three things and give them both forward and inverse kinematics. Forward kinematics means this makes this move, makes this move. Inverse kinematics means I pull the hand and the whole arm moves. And it does some geometry to figure out what the angle should be. But first up, we have to set it up properly. So in this file, these three pieces are all movie clips. Bing, bang, boom. So because in order for this to work, everything has to be a symbol, either a movie clip or a graphic. And they have to all be on the same layer. This is the only time in this program where animation requires everything to be on the same layer. Usually it's all got to be separate. So all on the same layer. Because that's where they're going to end up. And we're going to grab this tool right here. And fortunately, everything with this can kind of be fixed later. So when you set this up at first, you can make some changes. So I'm going to go to the front of my timeline. Makes my life easier. I'm going to click on here, and I'm going to click not in the center on purpose just to mess it up. But I'm going to click. I'm going to drag to this piece. And then I'm going to click again and drag to this piece. All right, and like I said, we're going to be making changes. It's not going to be our final rig as it is. But you can see all the pieces got moved off their original layer into something called Armature _3. It's called _3 because I've worked in here before, so it's like on the third go round on this file. And what's happening is that they're now all in this layer rigged up. You can see these round areas, basically they're joints. These long ones are basically the bones. And they're going to rotate around the joints. And so if I pull this hand, you can see everything else is matching. So this angle and this angle are changing. If I hold down Shift while dragging it, I can do this. Now you can see, like I said before, I put these in the wrong space on purpose. They're not rotating around the right spots. So we need to fix this. And I always undo to the point where it's the straight arm again, or wherever it started. You can start wherever you want, but usually you want the limb straightened out, and I want it to start there. So I'm going to grab my free transform tool. I'm going to select just this, and you can see that the anchor point is not in the center anymore. The anchor point is now wherever that joint is, and if I move it, I can move it to wherever I want. Now that was being a little, if I'm going to zoom out a little strange. It's like not going to any in all spots. And that might be because, yeah, snapping is on, which is no good with this. And it's especially going to be prevalent with this piece. I can't get it to the center because it's trying to snap to all the various other elements in here. So view, snapping, turn off snap align, turn off snap to objects. If you have guides, you need to turn that off too, but you can see now this isn't like stuttering anymore. It's kind of going wherever it wants to, or wherever you tell it to. So I can put these joints at the center of here, right? This is pretty obvious because it's a mechanical arm. They're going to rotate around these, you know, like round hinges. And this one I'm going to put like theoretically where the wrist would be. This is kind of acting like a hand. It's not a hand, but there you have it. The other thing you could do if you needed to is move this, and that will change where these pieces are without making animation a pain. Like most things, you have to set this up first before you start animating, but you definitely need to run tests, right? You need to move this up here and then like see how this is going to work and all this stuff. So I mentioned before that you get both FK and IK. IK is this. Pull the hand, everything else moves. And you can set this as a pose. But what if you want FK? Hold down Shift, and you get that. Hold down Shift when I click here, and when I click here. So that's one basic way to get things to move the way you want. And once again, I undo until I get everything back where it's supposed to be. Okay. Now the way this works, this armature layer is basically like a motion tween. I do this, A key sits up there automatically, although they're not called keys. If we right click, it's going to say pose. And I can clear a pose or I can insert a pose. So if I need something to hold here for a while, I'd click on that frame, insert pose, and it's going to stay there. There we go. Right? Until the next keyframe tells it to move. So that's how this would work. Let's see here. Okay. You can also cut poses, copy poses, paste poses, same as frames, same as layers, but you just have to go for the right words. So these all have different words, just so we can kind of differentiate what's going on. Let's see what else. So that's one way to set this up, but there's also another thing you could do that puts this more in line with, let me just, there we go. So I've gotten back to layer 1. That puts us more in line with how like rigs technically work in the real world. And that's, I'm going to create a control. So I'm just making a circle. Controls typically are very simple, primitive shapes. So circles, maybe triangles and squares, depending on what you're doing. Mostly circles or arrows. And they're typically made in a different color, so you can kind of differentiate them. I call these controls, some people will call them nulls, and a null is a thing that is there but you don't see it, because we can make this invisible eventually. But the idea is that you can pull the hand, the way I was pulling the hand before, it was getting a little wiggy, you know, so we can have this extra piece on here. And I'm going to set this up the same way. I'm going to, you know, one piece to here and that to there. And then we're going to have the last one go down to the control. And because it's an undoable thing, oh no, it kept that off. All right, so I'm going to set this up to be nice again. That went into the right spot. That did not. You know, you can tell already by this video that this is not something you do once and it's perfectly right the first time. That is not how this works. I'm going to put that right at the edge, actually. So this is something that you have to spend some time and you have to fix it. All right. Now what's going to happen is if I grab my regular move tool, I can pull this, and now that wrist is a little bit separate. All right, so there are further controls though. For one thing, you can change, if you click on the armature itself, you can actually change how it looks. So this is one style. This looks like 3D stuff. I kind of like this actually. I'm used to this, where there's like a volumetric bone kind of. You can also hide armature control editing and hints. A couple people in class reported having major accidental like things happening because there's all this crazy stuff with like, you know, press this and it does this. So if you're having trouble with that, there we go. You can tell it to hide that. But if you click on an individual bone, there's, just kidding, there it is. There's all sorts of different other issues, and I want to kind of show you how to use these to your advantage. Because right now, when we use the IK, and the whole point of IK is to be able to say, oh, I want the arm to move the way I want it to without having to figure out like, oh, it's this first and then this. Like I want to be able to just put the arm there. But right now, every joint is moving the same amount at the same speed. And so when I pull this, the wrist bends first, and then the elbow, and then this, and that's not how hands behave. So we are going to set up some parameters to make this automatically move more how we want it. How much you lock things down depends on what you're doing. This is a robotic arm, so there's actually, I can lock it down a lot and it won't look funny. If you're dealing with more of an organic piece, then it might be something different. All right, so there's two things we have to look at. One is the speed. So right now they all move at 100%, but if I bring this down to 10, and if I bring the wrist one down to 10, or 15 actually I think is what I discovered works, that means the elbow moves first. Look at that. Before the wrist was like bending all over here. Now it's the elbow that's bending. That's what I want. That's how I want this to behave. The first thing that should move is the elbow. Well, what else is wrong? Let's pretend this is a real human arm. It bends this way, it bends this way. Nope. So we need to, and always bring it back to 0, please. I want to keep this speed at 100%, but I want to constrain joint rotations. So we got this section right here. I'm going to turn on constrain. And let me see. I think it's the left that needs to be 0 and the right that needs to be like 130 something. So we're going to see if that's the correct. Yep. So now the elbow won't bend at all in this way, which means this has to swing, which is great. We're going to fix the broken wrist in a second. But it can still bend this way. And it can't bend all the way, which I also like. Even if this is a robotic arm, there's usually like a place where it kind of stops. So we want to, you know, these are things just kind of make your life easier. You can see in the hints, if you really zoom in, that you've only got a piece of that circle now. So it's kind of telling you there's a restraint. I'm going to click on this wrist. And 45 and negative 45 actually work pretty well. See, no more broken wrist. So I can, you know, bring the arm here, maybe move the wrist a little bit independently. If you think about hands, it's this section that you aim, not your fingers. So if you're moving your hand around, you grip stuff with the palm, not the point. So you can actually get the palm pretty much where you want it to, and then that means these two angles will be correct. And then you hold down shift, and then you just put the hand in the direction you want. All right, so these are the kinds of restraints we have to think of. Now, you probably noticed there's this joint X and Y offset. And this seems like such a good idea. I'm like, or the translation, right? So I want to be able to have it slide this way. And so I turn on enable, and I see these arrows, and I'm like, that's fantastic. And then I pull this, and like, what the hell? So what's happening is, as soon as you rotate the joint, the definition of X rotates with the joint. It's not using the world as the anchor, it's using the joint as the center for where X and Y are defined. So it's not helpful. I cannot think of a single reason why I would want to have this slide all over the place. I'm sure there is, but I don't have one. So that's something to keep in mind. Now, let's see about other real world. Oh, so if you do want to move this whole thing, like if you need it to slide forward, we select the whole thing with the free transform tool, and that is a posable idea. So if I grab this and move it, that works, right? So you can slide the whole thing, it just requires a slightly different tool. Okay, so let's say we want, well, first of all, we want to get rid of this control because it's going to confuse when we have this thing we want to pick up. So we can actually go into the library, double click on the control, zoom in a little bit, and under properties you can tell both of these colors to turn down the alpha, or maybe just leave the outline, whichever it is that you want. And when we go back to scene 1, we can't see it, but it's there. Whoops, wrong control. There we go. So you can still click on it, but you don't have to look at it. So how do we get this to pick up the baton? Well, this is gonna be a very quick animation. It's not gonna look good, but let's say it starts here, and I'm gonna pull this up a little bit. You know, like it's gonna be reaching for something, and then I have to move the whole. Whoops. I have to move the whole thing down a little bit. Actually, I'm going to put that there, and then I'm going to rotate this. Now, let's say it's approximately there, then I'm picking it up. So let's see. Not my best, but that's going to work. So at this point, I needed to pick up the baton and start moving with it, but I can't attach the baton to this new armature, or to this armature just now here. It's got to be attached the whole time or not. And I can't make any changes to like swapping out symbols that are across the whole thing, but we can kind of trick it. So I'm going to put a keyframe, or no, I'm going to get rid of all the frames for the baton layer up to that point. and I'm going to duplicate the armature layer. So right now they're identical. They both do the same thing. We can't see otherwise. I'm going to take this baton, I'm going to copy it, go into my library, and the hand, I'm going to duplicate that just like we did with the letters. I'm going to call it hand copy too because that'll work. And I paste the baton in somewhere, apparently. Hang on. It's probably appearing somewhere crazy. There it is. So I made the baton on movie clip just so it's like easier to deal with. So that's kind of where the hand's going to pick it up. I'm going to change. Hello? There we go. Kind of change where it is. I have to zoom way in order to do this. There we go. So I come back out to scene 1, and on my Armature baton, so I know that this is the one that's going to have the baton. I can, anywhere on the timeline, I can click on the symbol, swap symbol, hand copy, and I get this. Now don't worry about the fact that we can see it here. We're going to fix that. But I go to the frame where they overlap. And I have to click on the baton that's down here, and I have to make it match. Like I kind of put it where I wanted it to go, but now I'm going to line them up in terms of rotation, or at least close enough. All right, technically they're not perfectly lined up. You can see this. However, when we're done, you're never going to notice. All right. So basically it's going to come in, pick it up, and then what I can do is I can drag select this section on the first armature, Shift F5, no more frames. So now I just have the one armature. And now I can use this tool here, and I can bring it back up, and then I can grab bone tool, and I want it to be up here. I just want the wrist to be... Hello? Oh, I have my 45-degree rule. Maybe I could change that a little. Well, that's not 45 degrees. Oh, maybe it is. Well, changing it here is probably not the best. But this is the kind of thing you want to test out beforehand. So now it comes in, it picks up the thing, and you can see the old baton down here disappears, right? Because I have no more frames there. So now my issue is getting rid of this part where we can see the armature on this baton layer. Now, what's going to happen is we're going to get rid of some frames, everything's going to shift, and we're going to move it back. So I drag select everything up to right before the overlapping keyframe, but not actually that keyframe. And right click, remove frames, will remove those frames. Now you see everything offset. That's okay. All you have to do is select the entire section that is the armature and drag it so those keys line up again. And now we've got arm with no baton, picks it up, drags it this way. You never notice that those two batons like switch because it happens too fast, right? So you don't have to worry about them being perfect necessarily because it might not matter. And that's how you can swap out something is there and then something is attached. Because if you're animating this to follow the arm exactly, you are wasting your time. All right. When this is slightly complicated, you need a couple different layers. The baton needs to disappear. If it's going to drop the baton needs to reappear later. But this is so preferable to having to sit there and hand key this. If I see anyone hand keying it in an assignment, like, you're just going to lose points because there's a better solution. Slightly more technical, but so much better. All right. Now, one thing to think about with, I just want to show you something weird. So I'm going to like throw this over here. Like, I brought it up here, but now it's going to get rid of it. By the way, this timing is terrible. Don't time your stuff like this. Let's say I want both of these, this action and this action, to take longer. So you change that timing the same way you change any other timing. You take a keyframe and you drag it out. Or you take a keyframe and you bring it back and it's shorter. So shorter time span, it means everything moves faster. But if you're thinking to yourself, oh, I want to like move both of these, and you do this, see how you lose animation? I think it's a glitch. It's a bug for sure. this keyframe moved over here, and so now I have duplicates of the same keyframe, and I've lost this one. So you have to move these manually. Slightly annoying work. Or you can take this and drag it out just like a motion tween. Just keep in mind, if you try to shift them, you're going to break it. And one thing you should always do is watch it, because you can find, you'll notice your pose missing pretty much right away. The other thing you'll want to do in here is test it, because it's gonna move at a slightly, you can see there's no hiccup now where these things trade off. So in Animate, in the program, there's a hiccup right there, and it looks like you haven't done it right. If you play it again, look, there's a bit of a hiccup there. Now that might be because I'm recording this for the screen, it might be because it's too much. Either way, if you test the movie, it's going to run smoother. So Control Enter, or Control Test Movie in Animate, or test, you're going to want to do that more than usual. You're also going to want to save more than usual, because things will, oh look, it already had one recovery. Things will break more easily. This is more complex, so you're gonna be more likely to have problems. So save often, save as often, and watch your animation often to make sure it's doing what you expect it to. Alright, so we're gonna get into more complicated stuff with this next time, but this is all for this time. Oh, and if you're watching this for homework, the homework is to have this arm do something. I've had people, have it push a button, pick up a baton, a bowling ball. It doesn't have to be long. This right here is a few seconds. If you're going beyond 10 seconds, you're doing too much. So, like 4 to 6 seconds of animation. We're going for quality over quantity and just getting a handle on how this works, because it's weird.